Welcome back to the deep dive. Sometimes the most profound insights, they don't come from these sweeping government reports or huge scientific studies.
No, not at all.
Sometimes they come from looking really, really closely at just one person's highly specific personal account. And today, that's exactly what we're doing.
That's right. We're looking at an entry published very recently, November 22nd, 2024, from a blog called kianm.org. The title is Notes on Gardening, Part 366, Potential Plant Species as Semi-Aquatic Plants for Outdoor Ponds.
And the context here is it's absolutely critical. The author, Ang, he calls himself an old software plumber.
Which tells you so much right away.
It does. It immediately signals the kind of methodology we're about to see. This isn't just about, finding pretty flowers. It's about treating a garden and pretty much every topic as a system. Something to be debugged, documented, and, version controlled.
And the immediate goal of this specific note, Part 366, was the search for semi-aquatic plants for an outdoor pond. And this search led him to find some intriguing leaf-based options.
Functionally, they were a success, right? The note points out their remarkable adaptability, how they could thrive solely in water. So they passed the basic engineering test.
They absolutely did.
But, and this is the pivot, he immediately says he found their aesthetic appeal lackluster and that he's already on the hunt for more attractive alternatives.
So it's a successful experiment that, kind of failed the design brief. And that's really our mission today. It's not about the plants themselves.
No.
It's about the system. We're going to unpack this detailed, ongoing process of a true systems thinker who meticulously documents his quest for knowledge, whether that's about plants or programming. Okay, let's get into it.
Let's start with just the scale of this whole operation, because the metadata alone is pretty staggering.
Right.
That title, Notes on Gardening, Part 366, that tells you immediately that this isn't just a one-off thought. This is one entry in a massive, sustained, and sequential project. It's 366 documented experiments or observations, just in gardening. That doesn't even count all his other interests. It's a shift from, casual hobbyist to something more like a dedicated researcher.
And the volume. I mean, if we look at the source, the amount of documentation Ang produces is just exceptional. In 2024 alone, he's got 732 posts.
And 730 the year before that, in 2023. That's a commitment to logging information, sometimes multiple times a day. Every single day.
Okay, but I have to pause on that, though.
Yeah.
Because if someone is posting over 700 times a year, the cynical take is that it's quantity over quality.
That's a fair question.
Right. Does that volume just suggest kind of shallow documentation,
right.
just noise?
I see why you'd ask that, but when you actually look at the structure, you see the rigor. This isn't just a stream of consciousness. It's structured, categorized data.
The fact that he's on part 366 of just one series, that points to an almost archival mindset. It shows that even if an experiment gives him a negative result, like these plants that didn't look good, that result is still logged, it's indexed. It contributes to the whole knowledge base.
So it's not discarded work, it's just another data point.
Exactly. It's an accepted unit of data.
Yeah.
And you can see this rigor when you look at where this one entry, part 366, actually sits in the timeline. It's not some random burst of inspiration.
It's integrated into everything else he's doing.
Precisely. So part 366 is about finding these robust pond plants. The very next day, part 367 is about a pruning and regrowing technique.
Okay.
And the day before, part 365 was all about figuring out the adequate space needed for different plants.
So the search for the perfect pond plant is literally sandwiched between these other active experiments. He's thinking about constraints, about resource management, growth optimization, all at the same time.
It's like a sophisticated parallel processing environment.
That is the perfect analogy.
In software, you're always running multiple features or branches at once. You don't just stop everything to wait for one little thing to get resolved. For Ang, the garden is the code base.
And he's managing all these different iterations at once. Potting mixes, space requirements, and the aesthetic value of pond plants. It's all part of one huge interconnected research project.
And this is really the key takeaway for you listening at home. When a systems thinker treats every single variable, from something as mundane as space to the functional success of a plant, as an equal and necessary data point.
It changes everything.
It totally transforms the approach to learning. Failure isn't a roadblock anymore. It's just a recorded result that tells you what to do in the next version update.
Which takes us right into our next section, this tension between function and form. The old software plumber didn't just need a plant that worked.
No, he needed one that delivered on the user experience.
He even gives himself a hard deadline. He says the whole quest is because the festive season approaches. That's a serious constraint.
It absolutely is. That deadline immediately makes the aesthetic, the form, a critical requirement. In systems design, you have your functional requirements. The system has to work.
Right.
But then you have non-functional requirements.
Right.
It has to be secure, fast, and in this case, beautiful.
Let's really drill down on that. So first, function. The plant has to have remarkable adaptability, and it needs to thrive solely in water. That's the spec. The first candidates, they passed, they worked.
They were the minimum viable product, the MVP.
Exactly, the MVP. But an MVP isn't enough when your deadline is the festive season. Which brings us to form. The user experience. The plants were robust, but he called them lackluster.
Which forced him to search for more attractive alternatives.
Yeah.
It's that moment where the designer steps in and says, look, the tech works, but it doesn't meet the needs of the target market.
And why should you, the listener, care about some pond plans not looking pretty enough?
It's a great question.
Because that tension between technical success and the desired outcome. It exists absolutely everywhere. Think about a piece of software. It might be flawlessly coded, not a single bug, but if the interface is awful, if the form is lackluster, the product fails.
It's the classic difference between engineering and elegance. The software plumber in him saw his technical success finding plants that thrive was only half the battle.
If the goal isn't just survival, but presentation for a specific event, then the aesthetic suddenly becomes just as important as the function.
Maybe even more important. And what's key here, a key part of this whole iterative process, is that you don't just throw away the parts that did work.
Right. He explicitly says the quest uncovered even more intriguing leaf-based options. He learned something valuable even from the failure.
That phrase, uncovered even more, that shows his commitment to the documentation. He's closing the book on those specific plants, logging the data point. They work, but they're not pretty, and then immediately starting a new search based on stricter criteria.
He didn't just give up. He refined the search parameters for the next go-around.
Exactly. And to really appreciate that level of discipline, we have to look past the garden and see the full scope of this guy's portfolio. Because this is not just about gardening.
Not at all. This is where it gets really interesting. He applies the same rigorous process-driven method to, well, every single part of his life.
It's what's so fascinating. You see this iterative engineer's methodology applied across completely different knowledge domains. It proves the system itself is totally portable.
Okay, so let's list some of these other series. Alongside the gardening notes, he has specialized programming notes covering Python, AI tools, Go, Rust, and then these two highly specialized ones, Elixir and Erlang.
And it's probably worth putting those two in context for anyone who isn't deep into coding. Elixir and Erlang, they're often used for building massive, incredibly reliable systems. Think telecommunications, financial trading platforms, places where failure is just not an option.
So the very languages he chooses to focus on reflect a mindset that is obsessed with structure, reliability, resilience.
Exactly. And then he takes that same drive for reliability that he applies to computing, and he points it at home improvement, at typesetting, photography, dieting and exercises, and incredibly detailed fish-keeping logs.
Not just fish-keeping, betta spawn logs and misc fish's spawn logs. So specific.
It's not just a list of hobbies, it's a list of parallel, structured research projects. And this note-taking, it goes beyond just blog posts. It extends into these formal, almost technical projects. There's the Now page, This Week in Review, TWIR.
And even specialized library projects like Elixir Library for reading, ELFR, and Erlang Library to read, ERLTR.
Right. So the same mindset that creates a structured technical library designed for peak performance and data management. That is the exact same mindset he's applying to something as organic and unpredictable as a betta fish spawning cycle.
Or managing soil in a garden. The methodology is the product.
Which raises a really interesting psychological question, right? How does one person manage the mental load of running 366 gardening logs, multiple software projects, and fish-keeping logs all at the same time?
The system has to be the answer.
It is. The structured, consistent approach where every discovery is logged as just another neutral data point, it reduces the friction of switching between topics. He knows exactly where he left off in Part 366 because the documentation is just relentless.
And if we connect that rigor, his personal knowledge creation, to the bigger picture, This whole method is supported by his commitment to open knowledge sharing,
Yes, the source material notes his support for organizations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the Free Software Foundation, the Tor Project, and Wikipedia.
which creates this beautiful loop. He's using an open source methodology for his personal learning documentation, iteration, version control, and at the same time, he supports the global infrastructure that allows that kind of shared learning to flourish.
The pursuit of specialized knowledge, for him, seems inseparable from the pursuit of open, accessible knowledge for everyone.
So let's bring this deep dive home. We started with this tiny, granular look at a single entry, a disappointing result in a search for the perfect pond plant.
But we found something so much more profound than botany. We really uncovered a universal research methodology,
Yeah.
the systematic, structured, long-running approach of a true iterative engineer, a systems thinker who logs every single result, functional or aesthetic, as just another necessary step in a continuous process of learning and optimization.
So the final synthesis is this. The quest for highly specialized knowledge, it doesn't matter if you're coding a library in Rust or finding plants for a festive season display, it requires relentless documentation. You have to accept that your initial findings, even when they're technically successful, are just documented steps toward a much more complex goal.
That single entry, part 366, it's not an ending. It's like a log ticket in a software project that says, feature complete, now addressing user experience flaws. It ensures the next iteration starts with all the knowledge you gained from the last attempt.
So what does this all mean for you? It means knowledge is built one documented step at a time, and the method you use to structure your learning might just be the most valuable tool you have.
Which brings us to our final thought for you to consider. Take a moment and think about your most rigorous, process-driven professional skill. Maybe it's project management, maybe it's data analysis or accounting. And ask yourself, how could you take that exact organizational structure, that same attention to logging data and iterating, and port it over to accelerate your learning in a completely different passion or hobby? Like painting, or learning a language, or, yes, even gardening.